Velvet shadow, you sometimes enter your home and overhear something that wasn't intended for you. Yes, and it left me momentarily frozen in the hallway, her closest friend replied. I can't fathom how she behaves towards him. He deserves more respect. I stood still, I scarcely breathed, my spouse retorted softly. It's not straightforward. That encounter marked the first time I realized something within our marriage had changed, though I wasn't yet aware of the extent. Prior to these events, I believed I led a predictable life. At 37, I've spent my entire career as an architect, and I have always been drawn to orderly things, schedules, deadlines, details I could verify repeatedly. Marriage fit into that for me, not as a task, but as something you meticulously construct and constantly tend to. I was never striving for perfection. I merely wanted to be reliable, and for many years I managed to be. I hadn't engaged in contest with that, rather I maintained equilibrium. She acted swiftly, I moved steadily. That pace suited us for quite some time. Frankly, I believed it did. However, I'm not hasty with judgments. I require evidence, not presumptions. So even when our responsibilities increased and our dialogues dwindled, I convinced myself it was merely a busy period. Careers fluctuate, patterns adjust. I'd witnessed such transformations in other relationships. I assumed we would navigate through as we usually did. Yet over the past year, a subtle dissonance crept in. Nothing dramatic, merely brief pauses in her speech, as if she were screening what she expressed. At times, she'd begin discussing her day only to trail off midway, citing forgetfulness about what she wanted to mention. I refrained from prying, having learned restraint. Nevertheless, one instance remained etched in my memory, when she addressed me with a casual, "Hey," instead of my name, as if she had been doing so more frequently with someone else. I didn't respond, I merely noted the occurrence. After the "hey" instance, I became a bit more observant, not prying or snooping, merely observing the pattern of our daily lives. I wasn't trying to catch her in anything, I just wanted things to be back to normal. The first thing that caught my eye was how frequently her phone was in her hand. Emily is always engrossed in social media, so being online isn't unusual. However, lately she has been turning her screen away when I passed by subtly, not dramatically, just a slight twist of her wrist. It seemed like she was responding to clients. And yes, that made sense for the most part. One evening I arrived home later than usual. She was on the couch, laughing at something on her phone, a genuine laugh, the kind she used to share with me. When she noticed me standing in the doorway, her smile faded quickly, and she locked her screen, claiming she was just watching some silly meme. I remained silent, as I've learned that sometimes silence speaks louder than words. Another incident occurred during dinner. Previously, she shared every detail, including mundane aspects of her day. Now she only offered brief overviews and avoided personal topics. When inquired about her meeting with a new client, there was an unusually long pause before a vague response. This wasn't necessarily suspicious, but it seemed out of character. A notable incident occurred on a Saturday morning. Her phone buzzed with an unknown name, which she swiftly reached for and grabbed tightly when leaving the room. I remained silent during this event. However, the quickness of her action stayed in my mind longer than expected. I tried to disregard it, but the swiftness kept replaying over and over in my head. I'm generally cautious before assuming the worst. A name on a screen isn't enough for me to worry. But a few days later, the first clear sign of change emerged. I returned home unexpectedly early. I finished a meeting early and decided to utilize the spare time to advance a task. Upon entering home, I anticipated hearing her in the kitchen or on a call. Instead, her subdued voice emanated from the living room, neither upset nor cheerful, but softer than usual. She was speaking over the phone. I didn't intentionally eavesdrop, but she stated, "I shouldn't continue discussing him this way." After a moment of listening, she continued, "He doesn't want being involved in this." I halted midway down the hallway. I wasn't spying. I simply paused long enough to comprehend her tone didn't correspond with how she spoke to colleagues or kin. It was personal, intimate. The kind of voice one uses when the entire situation is already known. Upon hearing me place my keys, she terminated the call more swiftly than typical. She asserted it was only work, but her voice contradicted that statement. And she did not make eye contact when she said so. The instant I couldn't ignore was when I noticed something amiss. If it were legitimate work, she wouldn't have ended the call so hastily. I chose not to question her. Instead, I simply pondered the discrepancy, understanding it didn't fit anywhere. Following that phone call, I ceased making assumptions. I refrained from snooping, digging, or rummaging through her belongings. I merely kept watch. And then, a week later, the moment that shifted everything transpired almost by chance. I arrived home in the afternoon due to a rescheduled meeting with a client. Emily wasn't anticipating my return. Her car was parked outside, but the house felt eerily quiet. I approached cautiously, not wishing to startle anyone, just navigating through my own home as usual. Her laptop lay open on the dining table, something she never did when absent. I had no intention of tampering with it. I simply walked by en route to the office. As I passed, a notification appeared in the corner of her screen. The message came from my closest friend, Ryan. The excerpt revealed only a few words. "Had you informed him?" The rest of the message vanished as the screen darkened. I paused, not due to an attempt to read further, but because that solitary line conveyed enough. Ryan and I have been friends since college. He's a fitness instructor with a friendly demeanor, quick to connect with people, the one everyone trusts instantly. I had never doubted him, not even once in all these years. The sound of my keys must have alerted Emily as she entered swiftly, closed the laptop with a single hand, and stated her surprise at my early return home. She didn't probe why I was there. Instead, she asked if I needed anything from the office. I delayed discussing the notification initially. I sought clarity, not speculations. For 2 days, I observed Emily's movements around the house. Cautious, distant, as if she was avoiding anything that might trigger a conversation. Ryan didn't contact me, unlike his usual habit of checking in every couple of days. Even though our chat was brief, all is well, there's nothing new today. The quietness conveyed its message. On the third night, I chose to break the silence. I wasn't there to quarrel, merely discuss. I found her in the kitchen, engrossed in her phone once more. I ensured my tone remained calm. Loud conversations rarely bring resolution. I mentioned that I observed she ended a call rather hastily the previous week. I pointed out Ryan's name on her screen when I arrived home unexpectedly. I left other matters unsaid. The 2 facts were all I spoke about, keeping it clear and concise. Her response wasn't surprise but hesitation, as if weighing which version of events to relate. She stated that she and Ryan conversed occasionally. She explained he was assisting her with some personal issues. There were no specifics, no elucidation. Her gaze didn't meet mine directly. I wasn't trying to trap her. I just needed the facts to align, so I posed a question. Why him? She didn't respond promptly. Instead, she looked beyond me, avoiding eye contact, and stated that she felt our bond had weakened recently. She added that she hadn't intended for things to become complicated. The term ambiguous hung thickly between us. I didn't escalate, I didn't insist. Instead, I allowed the tension to persist. Eventually, she admitted, "We can no longer be as close as we once were." She offered no additional insights. Following her declaration of emotional distance, an atmosphere in our home subtly transformed without either of us uttering a word. We didn't argue or debate. Instead, we navigated around each other like 2 individuals tiptoeing around a fragile situation. I refrained from pursuing her, did not pry about her conversations, and ceased my efforts to extract more information. I came to realize that demanding closeness only exacerbates the chasm when it's been voluntarily withdrawn. So I concentrated on maintaining stability, work, routines, essential tasks, as they were the only aspects within my grasp. Emily adjusted in kind. She began consuming her meals in her office, citing deadlines. She closed her door more frequently. Not forcefully, but gently, as if this new arrangement had become customary. At night, I'd notice the tapping of her keyboard and occasionally a gentle hum from her phone, followed by moments of silence before she typed again. I didn't require knowledge of specifics. The pattern spoke volumes on its own. We continued to share a bed for some time, yet it felt as if we were in separate locations. She'd often lie down facing the wall, dozing off even before the light was turned out. I refrained from moving closer. I had no intention of reaching out to someone who showed no signs of reciprocation. One evening, I awoke to find her phone illuminating beneath the covers. She wasn't typing rapidly, but rather sending slow messages, one by one, as if prolonging an unwanted conversation. She failed to perceive my awakeness. I remained silent and merely observed her screen dimming when she eventually turned it over. From that night on, a sense of resolution inside me solidified, not in a serene manner, but more like acknowledging an unwelcome truth I could no longer evade. I ceased waiting for things to revert to their former state. Grew tired of waiting, I decided to alter my lifestyle. Instead of going home after work, I began staying at the office longer for solace rather than obligation. I took up an overlooked project and dedicated my extra time to it, finding satisfaction in its responsiveness to effort. At home, I moved essential items into the spare room, keeping only a few clothes, a notebook, and additional chargers. I didn't discuss this change with anyone. I merely sought space devoid of tension. Emily observed the shift but did not inquire about it. Once she hesitated while witnessing me carrying a pile of folded shirts, as if to ask why, but she held her tongue and resumed her phone usage. The ensuing silence conveyed more than any explanation could have. I ceased checking if she was joining me in bed. Occasionally she did, occasionally she didn't. I no longer maintained count. I wasn't attempting to quantify the gap between us. Several days later, she passed by the guest room and noticed my luggage partially packed on a chair. She halted in the doorway, then continued walking without uttering a word. A week following her encounter with that half-packed bag, something transpired that completed the puzzle. It wasn't sensational. It wasn't a declaration. It was merely unexpected information from someone I thought wouldn't be entangled. I was getting coffee near my workplace when Mark, a shared acquaintance, noticed me. We hadn't spoken in months. He inquired about my well-being at home. I responded briefly, stating we were experiencing difficulties. I didn't intend to disclose more. He hesitated before revealing he had seen Ryan a few days prior at the gym. He casually mentioned my name, anticipating a quick anecdote or jest. Instead, Ryan apparently expressed his intention to resolve the matter eventually. Emily and I hadn't orchestrated this situation. Mark informed me he was unsure of its implications, but suggested I should be made aware. I remained silent. Over the years, I've learned to refrain from reacting until I comprehend the situation fully. However, an inner realization occurred, not anger, merely clarity I had been ignoring. During my drive home, I didn't play any music. Instead, I revisited the sequence of events. Late-night messages, subtle phone calls, her private dinners, the unbridged distance, and the lack of transparency. These signs did not suggest a fresh affair. They hinted at an ongoing one that didn't commence when I became aware, but when they became less adept at concealing it. Upon arriving home, Emily was in the living room with her computer. She glanced at me for a fleeting moment, as if assessing my countenance, then returned her focus to the screen. She neither inquired about my whereabouts nor did I divulge what I'd heard. Yet, I believe she sensed a change. That night, I retreated to the spare room and completed packing the suitcase I had left partially packed earlier. Unhurried, devoid of sentiment, merely persistent. A handful of shirts, my laptop, everyday items, these were what I claimed. The room's emptiness didn't stir a sense of significance. I simply took what was mine. Emily remained in the living room, her keyboard clicking rhythmically, then pausing, then resuming. She neither called nor questioned me. That quietude echoed as the response to all unspoken queries. On my phone, I scanned apartments near my workplace. One offered a temporary lease. Without hesitation, I filled out the application form. It wasn't about making a statement. I merely required a place that didn't feel like prolonging the wait. Upon returning to the kitchen, I placed my key on the counter. She glanced at it and me as if contemplating a response. However, she held her silence, shutting her laptop gradually, as though giving herself time to acclimate to the situation. I offered no explanation. I picked up my bag, approached the door, paused momentarily, and then exited the house without casting a backward glance. Appreciate your attention throughout the narrative. Share your thoughts below. Don't forget to subscribe. Additional unheard tales await.